Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your hosts of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are locked and loaded to yet another episode of the Conspiracy Farm. I am, as always, your ever faithful co-host, Jeffrey Wilson, riding shotgun with my boy, UFC Hall of Famer, Pat Miletich. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good. We've got a really great guest today, a combat veteran, retired Marine, very intelligent guy, Ohio State grad. He's a Buckeye. And, I've had some very interesting discussions with him about the subject we're going to talk about today, and he's on point, man. He knows what he's talking about.
Which is Las Vegas, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get started, I want to shout out and thank you to all the people who have taken the time to support the farm, support the operation. Shout out to my boy Shane Nichols for your contribution to the operation, my man. Peace and so much love. Thank you so much. Every little bit helps. Click on the link in the description of this video. It's our PayPal link. Every little bit is helpful. We are trying to take this to the next level. Obviously, we're starting out with a little TV show here, even trying to take that to the next level. And we don't take any money from the bad guys. So this is a grassroots, listener-operated, funded operation. So thank you again so much. And, yeah.
In other words, what you're saying is there's no pharmaceutical commercials on this show.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're half the commercials on the symptoms you got. So today, man, like my man said, we have a good, awesome guest today. George Pardos is joining us today. As we all know, ladies and gentlemen, on October 1st, 2017, something wicked this way came to Las Vegas. And we're going to talk about it, man, from the official story, which is this gentleman went up and did this dastardly deed by himself, to a long list of, and we're going to be hypothesizing here, folks. And the intention here is absolute respect for the families, everyone who's been affected by this. But we are going to tumble down the rabbit hole to discuss so many of the options. We've heard so many stories.
If one of my family members was shot or murdered, injured or murdered, I'd want to know the truth. And there's nothing disrespectful about seeking the truth, right?
Absolutely not. And that's what we're doing here today, because we're hearing stories of, like I said, just him being the lone gunman, to him being ISIS, to him being an arms dealer. We're going to talk about all these different scenarios, as well as kind of an acoustic breakdown of where we're hearing about second shooters. But like I said, we got our boy George Pardos on today. How are you doing today, George?
I'm doing well. I mean, I just called. I had a few minutes ago while talking to Pat, CNN, in the time that Pat called me till now, CNN just came out and said that the shooter, Mr. Paddock, shot and killed a security guard there 6 minutes prior to him beginning to shoot, which goes to question. You get a security guard shot, you have it on camera, you've got live footage from the hotel. Why isn't a response team out there?
Well, and even before we even kind of get started with this, something I found, I think I shared with Pat on 4chan on September, I believe, 11th, 2017, a gentleman posted by the name of John went on to essentially say, avoid large crowds tomorrow. If you see 3 black vans, run away.
And he even said he didn't know for sure it was going to happen.
He said it may not happen tomorrow, but Las Vegas is in their sights. Now, who's there? We're going to talk a little bit about that, because anytime something like this happens, you have to ask yourself, qui bono? We could get into the conversations almost like the Kennedy assassination. How many shooters from what direction? How many rifles, etc. That kind of, it's a fun conversation to have when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, especially as it begins to contradict the official story. But of course, as always, there is always a larger apparatus of somebody or some groups benefiting from this chaos.
Right, but let's bring it back, George. I want to talk to you specifically about logistics of a shooting like this. You're a combat vet. You were in Somalia. You've been in firefights. Only those who have been in combat and have been in battles understand that. And you are also a very intelligent guy in terms of thinking about how this logistically went down. So go ahead and start breaking this down a little bit.
Okay, we made a video about this earlier, but this is from a technical standpoint. everybody was, I got the information from doing a survey. I used Google Maps. I used the elevation. I used the street map, the street view, the Apple app where you can tells you the walking distance. Where Jason Ledeen had took the stage to the window is roughly 465 yards. Now, if you do a Pythagorean theorem that the bottom end of the range to the height to elevation, that means Mr. Paddock was shooting at a distance of 481 yards. Now, someone that had no previous military training whatsoever, unless they have a record somewhere that we don't know about. He wasn't a law enforcement agent, and he wasn't even, from anything I can gather, he wasn't a military trained or Leo or any of that. He's making shots.
His brother corroborates the fact that he had no military background.
Right. So here's my issue. You're telling me that a guy fired 2,000 rounds roughly, which is the amount of rounds you would have to hit, even probability hits, to score 28% effectiveness, is roughly the amount of people that you would have to shoot. So that number, the 28%, has come from the Rand Corporation in Vietnam to on killing from Lieutenant David Grossman. There's a lot of different places you can find that number. For every 100 rounds that somebody in combat fires, you roughly hit about 28%.
And these are trained. These are trained military shooters.
Trained shooters. This is not So you're telling me that you would have to shoot roughly, give or take, a couple thousand rounds.
Right.
Now here's the thing that I point out. We were in Badoa. It's a place outside of Mogadishu. We got into I don't know, whatever you want to call it, a firefight and a skirmish. I put the downrange right around 12 magazines. Now, I was trained, at the time, that didn't happen in 11 minutes. Let me tell you this. This happened over a course of an hour or so. But here's the point. I was exhausted, and I was trained, and I was on active duty. You're telling me a guy put together 2,000 rounds that quickly? It doesn't make sense, because then what they're not saying is, one of the things that happens when you start putting down a lot of rounds downrange is you get what's called a shooter's cone. And the reason for that is you get the muzzle energy is like getting hit with a flashbang. It keeps coming back. This is why the military has what's called a sustained rate of fire for weapon systems, so you don't get that. Then on top of that, you have what's called shooter's mirage, is that when the gas and the burn off from the round starts elevating, it creates a little bit of mirage on the platform. Now, even with optical sights, with aiming point, even a Leupold 3x9, what is what the weapon looked like, there's going to be a lot of mirage there. How did he keep it on target in that impact area, which is basically right by the stage? From a technical standpoint, these are shots that even LeBron could make. I mean, it doesn't sound right to somebody that is trained. The other thing that I point out, and this is something I shared with you, why do you have trained police officers in pictures covering from opposite angles? And that's, and I showed you that from the North Miami shootout in the 80s and North Hollywood in the 90s. Even a trained officer is hiding taking cover behind a vehicle. They're not looking at the Mandalay Bay. They're looking at the right. It just doesn't add up if you talk about logistically.
Well, and then another portion, I think, Pat, I sent it to you this morning. I forget the guy's name, but he's the head of natural news of the health ranger. He did a very, very in-depth, about a half-hour-long acoustic analysis, and he pretty much said the very thing you're saying. The shooter from the more outer perimeter was around 425 to 450 to 475 yards. And he said with the analysis of the waveforms, there was another shooter within 200 to 300 yards of a smaller radius there. Have you heard anything about that kind of acoustic analysis, differentiating between the shots that are further away and the shots that are closer away, that they can analyze the acoustic waveform?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what that's called: muzzle brake, muzzle energy. So this is just technical, this is just from a technical point. When you have a hypersonic round, and at the M16 AR-15 platform, I think the round comes out roughly at 2,900 feet per second. It's a pretty, the 5.56 comes out rather fast. Now there's some other rounds that, depending on whether, it was what the loads were, because they haven't released that, you're getting around 3,000 feet per second. The muzzle energy from that is going to sound different. And the reason is because even if you fire two or three consecutive rounds, you still have muzzle energy coming back because you have the gas blowback coming out of the barrel. It doesn't sound, to me, it sounds like a belt-fed weapon only because of the cadence. Now,
that's what I've heard as well from multiple different sources, belt-fed.
Yep.
And we've, I've been around. I was an M60 gunner, which is a 308. And when you start putting rounds down range, there's a cadence to it. There's a cadence to a 249, which is squad automatic weapon. There's also a cadence to an M16. None of the long burst did not sound like an M16. And here's the second part of it. One of the people were saying he was using a CMAG, which is a 90-round drum or a 100-round drum, depending on who the manufacturer is. I have never seen one of those being fired without having a jam, because it uses basically a Nautilus spring system to push out, and again, it jams. None of the storyline is congruent with the weapons that they're showing. That's and us as a veteran, and mind you, one other thing, when I said I went to MP school, the scene doesn't look congruent. There's just too much things not to add up, and I think a lot of this would be cleared up once they release more information and say.
Do you think autopsy reports will help? Do you think, as far as extracting not ballistic, but forensics, which direction bullets may have came from, will autopsy report help?
Yeah, because here's the thing that I pointed out, and this is one other thing I pointed out. There's a picture of the shooter dead. Okay. Now, the blood spatter is congruent. The blood spill is congruent. There's nothing out of the ordinary about what he looks like. And because here's the thing, your heart keeps pumping for 25 to 35 seconds even after you're dead. It's not when you're dead, your body just doesn't shut down completely even if you've been shot through the brainstem. Here's the question. I've never seen a gun that has gone 3 feet behind him to the right from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That's not congruent with it.
It was like it must have been a basketball handle on it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks strange, the placement of the weapon after
for it to get there, right?
Right, and here's the thing that is congruent. If you shoot yourself in the mouth and then you're literally disconnecting the brainstem, and you're gonna be dead instantly. Your mouth is going to fill up with blood. That's consistent.
There was another long rifle over his leg, over one of his legs, the lower leg.
What's not congruent about that is they're saying he shot himself with the 38. That doesn't look right. And here's the other thing, which all of us are pointing to. There have been active shooters, or whatever you want to call them, that they've released information, and all of us have said the same thing. Yeah, that sounds right. The Virginia Tech shooter, there was no conspiracy there. I mean, the rounds were congruent. The firing pattern was congruent with the weapons he used. The Colorado abortion clinic, that was congruent. Columbine was congruent. I mean, This isn't. So I'm not. What we're saying is not all active shooters are deep state, configurations.
Right.
What we're saying in this case today, with the information that the FBI and the Las Vegas police have released, it doesn't make sense to the people that have seen this in real life.
Did you hear about the active shooter drill that took place 2 days before this all went down?
Yeah, and here's the other thing. A week before, MGM dumped $200 million in stock.
That was with George Soros, MGM, a lot of their executives. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, expound on that.
This is the other thing. Before 9/11, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not always a deep state guy. Sometimes, I mean, you tell me who the babushka lady is, I'll start going farther down the rabbit hole. But here's the thing. Prior to 9/11, they dumped what was equivalent, and I have to go back and look, but between 150 to 170 million in airline stock, and no one knows who the entity is that put that option in.
Well, and we found out that the firm that did that was headed up by a guy named Buzzy Klongard, who ended up become the executive, one of the heads of the CIA, like the underlings, and he then went on become the head of German Deutsche Bank. So
yeah, I mean,
interesting.
And this is the stuff that drives people crazy, because when you're looking at it from a totality of circumstances, you have to say what sounds right, what doesn't sound right. Let's apply critical thinking and say, okay, you've got a 64-year-old guy who is shooting rounds downrange. Here's one of the things that I pointed out to Pat, and because me and him have trained together and all that. Your brachial and radial tendon in your arm is the first thing to go when you are in that position. So picture yourself with your arm at a 90-degree angle, holding the trigger. Even with a bump fire stock, you still have to hold the trigger in place. Your brachial and radial tendon is going to your muscles are going to get tired. Even if you've been training, they're going to get tired.
Right.
And so you're telling me a 64-year-old guy, who's got a body by hostess, it just doesn't. That doesn't add up, man. I mean, it just
right.
I mean, he's got the muscle mass of a prepubescent Scottish male. I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't look right, and that's what we as professionals, or to say, as veterans, we're looking. This is where it doesn't add up.
This is, when I've gotten inundated, and I know Pat has too, people that I don't even know sending me videos and screenshots, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, none of it adds up. None of it really makes sense, and there's so many holes in the official story.
With 2,000 rounds fired to hit 28%, which is 500 and some people out of 2,000 rounds, right? That's how many people were injured.
Right.
Look, where are all the shell casings? They're sparsely scattered on the floor.
If they find even one shell casing on the ground where the concert was, it's a wrap as far as second shooter goes.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. I want to go there and inspect the ground. I want to see where the rounds were scraping off the concrete. I mean, wouldn't there be sparks at night, George?
Yeah, that's an impact cone. I mean, you look at the cone, you look at the radial cone of fire, and that's what, again. There's a video that you posted, Jeffrey, that I was watching at, and I'm sorry, I did not see any ground mist. And ground mist is where you look at an impact area on the impact cone, you see rounds hitting the ground. I don't see any of that.
Right.
And here's the other thing that in the acoustic area. When you hear a bang, they're shooting. When you hear a bang crack or a bang whiz, they're shooting at you.
Right.
There's a video that is going around. It looks like it is with the stage at about 2:30 at that angle. There's a girl that is running by that gets shot. Okay, she falls to the ground. Typical shot. The second, she gets shot. You hear the rounds coming, but you don't see the impact where it should be. And I'm like, that doesn't look right. That looks like a lower elevation shooter. That's all we're saying is, hey, look, guys, the story you're saying is like, is like asking your kid, no, Dad, I didn't take the last cookie. It doesn't sound right, and that
corroborates the testimony from the girl who they interviewed, like brunette girl, kind of greenish eyes, red plaid shirt, where she was saying it was on the ground. They were pushing us basically towards the parking lot, where she said where there were more people in the parking lot firing from there.
Yeah, and
her testimony alone, it was saying that there was somebody on that ground level.
And another guy that got hit, he and his friends were hunkered down behind a vehicle, and as the gunfire would go off, he said each time it got closer, and he said to his friends, "They're coming this way. We got to get out of here. We got to move." And they moved, because he said very clearly they were getting closer and moving and advancing while they were firing.
Well, and I got messages from like you said, George, former military who's hit me up, who I'll just say have ties to the Mandalay, who I told them they didn't have to come on camera. They could be announced if they wanted to, but they didn't even want to do that. So, but that former law enforcement, former military who corroborate kind of what you're saying, these shots don't sound right as far as coinciding with the official narrative.
And that's all we're saying. I mean, we're not saying that this, I mean, stepping aside from who was behind it, the story so far that's coming out doesn't sound legit. And that's what we're saying as veterans and people that have actually put rounds down range. Now,
they've had to admit that. ABC News has had to admit possible second shooter. The police, during their press conference yesterday, had to adjust the timeline as far as when he checked in. They originally said the 28th or whatever.
And now it's the 25th.
Now it's the 25th.
What are they hiding, George? That's the thing is, look,
right.
They wouldn't be saying these things if they weren't trying to cover something up and then changing their story as they go along.
Well, and leaking the photos, like you said.
Right. Why would you leak photos of a crime scene, of the biggest mass shooting ever, unless you wanted to send a message and have people think a certain way?
Within a day. Like that happened, as you saw, everyone saw this, within a day or two. That never happened.
Right.
Well, not even, and let's be honest, if we put this on scale, the Virginia Tech pictures weren't released until I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, because I think you quoted on this before, but the Virginia Tech weren't released, I think, till 20 days in.
Some mass shootings, I've never seen the photos of them at all.
Right.
Yeah, but with the Freedom of Information Act, they released them. I think the Virginia Tech shootings, especially with the casings and the blood spatter on the walls and stuff like that, they were released.
This one didn't take an FOIA.
I was just going to say, it smells like a fart in a car simply because it was
I'm saying that it didn't take a Freedom of Information Act because it's a state school and that is part of the federal government. Here's the thing. In Columbus, we had the Somalian kid with a knife on campus a little while back. They released the photos the same or the next day. They were congruent. I'm just saying that here's the problem with today's environment. I think the press is losing their ability to narrate the story. And as a result of it, you're getting questions that normally might have not been brought up by normal people.
Well, you got accidental journalists and social media. It forced them to change their narrative within like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, and here's the thing. This guy, I don't want to reveal the source because the guy is a friend of mine and he's an actual, I'll just say he's a former veteran with one of the Special Forces operations units. And he made a valid point that nobody is bringing up on this. And he says, what if that guy wanted to be a martyr? Just hear me out on this. And this is, so the guy knows that they're going to die and this has followed the pattern of suicide bombers. Okay. And when you just step away from the box for a second and think about this, he kills himself, kills a whole lot of people, and he does it for a cause. Now, what happens if that cause was they wanted to get gun control initiated? Now, this is pretty, a stretched narrative, but think about that for a second. If you are going to have a cause, what is the thing that you do to lead that cause? You martyr yourself while taking innocents with you. That's insurgency 101.
Well, that coincides with the narrative that they even say he recently converted to Islam. The lady.
Yeah, but that's not. I don't know that
in of itself, but like Terry Wynn, or the head of the Wynn thing, he was saying throughout the months and months of them being in Vegas, they never drank a single drop of alcohol, which is also strange. I don't know if that means he's a devout Muslim, maybe he's a Mormon, maybe the guy just doesn't drink. But
yeah, I mean, but here's the one. Name me. But during that same time, name me that he was gambling, which is also haram.
Sure.
Let's just do that. He was gambling. Here's the thing. I want to see the room service bill because
we did.
No, you did not. No. You saw a room service bill.
Right. It definitely showed more than one person. 2 sodas.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you saw a room service. I want to see the room service for the other 3 days before the days prior to that. Because let me tell you, I know a lot of gamblers. I know I've been to Vegas. I've watched the World Series of Poker. I used to write for Fight Magazine, and I've seen what they do out there when they binge play. I've seen guys binge for 8-10 hours straight. They come back and they drink. And I want to see the room service bills prior to that. But like I said, with this whole thing, none of the story from a technical aspect, even from an ideological aspect, sounds correct, because who were you angry at? You're a millionaire. You don't fit the pattern. I'm disgruntled.
That's what I'm saying is, look, and you may not choose to go down this rabbit hole with us, but a guy that made
I'm not completely there. And the only other thing that
well, you gotta let me explain first.
Hold on, and then I'll be quiet for a second. And this is the last point I'll make on this. The guy filed a slip and fall adversarial lawsuit against the casino out there.
Right.
And this is a few years before. Now, slip and falls are very common. Those are common lawsuits. He would have then been on facial recognition. And if you file an adversarial lawsuit against the casinos, there's a term that they use about where you are no longer being able to be an invited guest in.
Right.
Why did they let him in the first place? That doesn't sound right to me either. And I'm just looking at it from a business perspective. If you sued my company, I'm not letting you come back into my store.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So.
Well, that and the metal detectors. They have metal detectors all over out there that did not go off in, with these 20 plus weapons and however many hundreds of pounds of rounds.
Well, I don't know I don't know where they were deployed at. I mean, that's the question.
Well, it's here, and the Wynn guy, slipped up and said he used the freight elevator in the interview he did. That he could have possibly used the freight elevator. If you can go back and watch that interview, he kind of slipped up.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a DJ convention going on at the same time, and if the guy says, "Hey, listen, you slip a guy $100 to get you upstairs to get your bag," I don't find that. I can see that narrative working. I can see that, because I've been to Vegas. I mean, if you slip one of these guys at the hotel $100, $50, whatever, they'll do just, they'll go out of their way, because again, if you take a look at where his suite was, he had reserved that suite 2 months in advance, because you're not getting that, you're not getting that suite, in 2 days, with that concert. I mean, even bookings.com, the guy that released the bookings.com info said that, 2 days prior, Las Vegas was like at a 98% rating, which is almost full occupancy. Now, very rarely does it get to 100%, but I mean, you're at a very high level. It just doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, plenty of holes, man. Sorry to my absence there, a little technical stuff. But yeah, I mean,
So anyway, let me go to this. If I'm a dope dealer, if I'm a guns dealer, illegal weapons moving type person, I'm going to go to Vegas and try and launder some money, right?
Correct.
And he made $5 million reportedly gambling in 2016. There's something very fishy with this also. And is it really that far of a stretch, George, to say the guy had 2 airplanes, one of them was traced back to a corporation that was connected to a guy in the Obama administration? That's not a stretch, that's a fact. That plane was originally owned by that person. Is it a stretch to say that this guy was moving weapons for either the FBI or CIA, and he thought he was doing an arms deal and got set up, and this stuff went down?
I mean, that's a possibility because, like I said, that's, if you take a look at it at the motive, I mean, you do a last Boy Scout, you smoke a couple cigarettes, kill everybody in the room. I mean, that's, that is a possibility. I mean,
well, this also coincides with the fact that a lot of his financial transactions going back to 2014 turned up on certain radars that the federal government has on financial transactions dealing with terrorism, money laundering, etc. Sorry about that.
So,
well, and you guys posted this on your wall. The Las Vegas Police Department sheriff said, I'm sorry, the Las Vegas Sheriff's Department said that he had planned an escape route. Right. How do they know that? What was the trigger?
I was wondering that too, because that kind of came up recently in the last couple of days.
What would be the telltale signs that someone had planned an escape route? Was there a car outside running?
I know.
I mean, what's the signal? Because here's the thing. There in any pattern in what they call heuristics, in every pattern, you have to. There's signals, and so what did they have? I mean, did he have an escape car in the garage with, rented plates? Did he,
He's gonna go 30 to the floor. I mean, everyone's.
That's where here, George. Go back to the security guard that was shot. Where was the security guard shot and killed?
Right,
we don't know. I don't know. I don't know where. I have not seen that information, so I can't answer that one.
It's supposedly right outside the door. He supposedly put 200 rounds through the door, the hotel door, and hit the security guard, who was supposedly initially was responding to the smoke alarm from his guns. Now it's saying he was responding to something else on the floor. So again, shifting of the narrative in real time.
And right. Let's talk about also the video that I saw of the lady inside the Bellagio, where the front side of the Bellagio it got scraped.
You're talking about there
by automatic fire, and people were all on the ground hiding inside the Bellagio, and her saying, the news is not reporting this. I'm just going to tell you what's really going on. This place just got hit by gunfire, and that happened right before all this stuff broke out.
Area footage. The ARIA footage.
No, that's different. So again,
that's a different one.
That whole night, I listened the next day. Okay. The police scanned for about an hour and a half. You had Tropicana, Mandalay Bay, New York, Bellagio, Aria. It's all of these. Within minutes, you're like, oh, we're here in New York. No, nothing here. Oh, we're here. But they were saying like GSW, gunshot victim here, and then they go there. Oh, nobody here in New York. No, nobody, false alarm. And like I told Pat, somebody, either those really happened or somebody was calling those in, which actually leads to the whole freaking narrative of like all these different mis and disinformation stories, which is just convoluting the whole freaking thing, which in my opinion, I think is part of the whole operation, keeping everybody guessing. Arms smuggler, ISIS, you know what I mean? The brother sitting there, he's really odd. He's wearing a T-shirt the other day. He used to work for a PR firm out of Florida that did PR for the Pulse nightclub shooting. So it's like, the guy's dad was FBI most wanted, the pilot with the, tracking him down to different, it's crazy. He's got government written all over him.
Right. And here's the thing that that you always, you go back to trends. Okay. I pointed something out the other day, and I got into this, into this debate with a gentleman, and I've been able with a saw, okay, squad automatic
Squad
weapon,
automatic weapon. Yep.
and three, um, I had 3 drums. I had to cover a distance of 700, almost 800 yards. Okay, it's not easy. And so you're telling me this is the other thing that I saw is that these guys were he was lifting up the weapons from one place going back to the other, and he did this in a matter of 11 minutes.
Right.
I man, I just tell you guys, it just doesn't the
Let's
logistics.
talk about when you were a Marine and in shape. How old were you?
Well, I mean, I served till I was until 2000 in the Army Reserve. But when I was in the Marine Corps, served from 84 to 88. I was 230 pounds.
And how
I
much do
was
you
in
weigh now? Sorry to ask, but
310,
I'm just. What's that?
310, 312.
So when you were 230, you were a freaking badass, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And it was tough for you to carry weapons.
yeah. I mean, even when when I was in
Saws
when
are
I
not
was
light. I've fired
right.
saws before. Those things are heavy.
And even when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was in the Army Reserve from 88 to 2000. And I went on a couple deployments. Like I said I went to Somalia in the in the Army Reserve, and I went to Kosovo. Even then, when I was still in shape. You got to remember, Pat, in '97, I wrestled for the U.S. Army team.
Right.
So I mean, even when during those times when I was in shape, it's still exhausting. You're carrying dead weight, and an M6 and an AR-15, that platform that they showed a picture of. I'm not talking about what we carry, but
Right.
that platform weighs empty 16 pounds.
Yeah.
Now, and 37, 35, depending. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
No, I was just saying that adds up. That poundage that adds up.
Yeah, I mean, and you're not carrying it as a weight. I mean, 16 pounds as a weight is not the same as 16 pounds when it's 40 inches long and you're having to maneuver it around. It's dead weight, and it doesn't move like you think it does. And that's what I'm saying. Those are the technical things that we've seen that don't add up. And I mean, um, and here's the other point. If you always follow the money, this is something that I'm going to bring up, and this is just because, like I said, I understand Vegas. There's a mechanism in Vegas for what's called a gambling marker. Those gambling markers can be sold. That's something that wasn't only one person has brought this up in conversation. That if a gambling marker is like a check, I can hand you the check, and you can then then you can hand the check to somebody else. And I think it was an easy way of doing that.
Well, when you talk about, players involved, I always go back to, like I said, follow the money, key bono, something I found very interesting that Pat just mentioned a second ago. So back in Christmas, whatever that was, the underwear bomber that wound up necessitating Michael Chertoff's security group putting in Rapiscans, which was actually run by his biggest client called OSI Services, owned by a man named Deepak Chopra, not the same Oprah Deepak Chopra, but he pretty much had a multi-million-dollar deal with the TSA for the scanners, which ran out about 2 years ago. So getting into the key bono, you have to look at something like that, and then individuals like Sheldon Adelson or a gentleman by the name of James Mirren. He's essentially the CEO of the MGM International.
And Mirren's one of the guys that sold millions of dollars
of stock. But he's also on a board called the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, which is run by the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and he's also a member of the Critical Infrastructure Security and Resilience National Research Group, and their whole thing is about getting legislators to put these kind of back scanners, more and more back scanners and scanners in general inside not just casinos, high schools, etc.
Arenas all around the country.
Are you talking about
Literally
are you talking about the Siret scanner?
Yeah, well, basically the same type of scanner, the back scanners as well as the body scanners that went into the airports. But hold on, my point is, within 24 hours, the CEO of the Chertoff Group, his name is Chad Sweet, was on all the news shows talking about
scanners.
Wow, something like this. Wow, we really need to up our security in Las Vegas by utilizing things like, I don't know, the scanners that we sell. So, pay attention
let me bring
to those
this,
names, ladies and gentlemen. James Mirren, Michael Chertoff, CEO of OSI Systems, Deepak Chopra. These are just some names to think about when you start talking about Key Bono and Follow the Money.
Scanners coming to an arena near you in the very near future.
Well, here's the thing. I want to point this out from a technical. At the Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, they have and a couple other places at the hotel. They have these scanners that look like it just looks like a small obelisk. Siret McCall of what's equivalent to the Israeli is part of the Israeli Special Forces Operations Group uses these. They have a densometer on there where it can measure. Now, if you have one weapon on you, maybe it comes off, maybe it doesn't. But if you have multiple weapons on you, or at least you're printing, it will pick that up. So if you have, let's say, a magazine or two magazines and a sidearm, it will pick that up. Those scanners are relatively effective, but they're also very expensive. The Secret Service uses them.
That's the point.
That's our point.
Here's the thing. The Secret Services on what they call national level events, like the Super Bowl, has them. So
they're trying to make these ubiquitous. High school games, casinos, theaters. This goes into the larger, in my opinion, the social engineering of the technocracy that has us all tagged and bagged the moment we walk out of the door with our phone. It's already happening. We see it. But, the brave new world is unfolding. And things like this, these events, only expedite it.
Well, and here's the thing. Chertoff was, used the line by Heydrich, and that scared me more than anything else. He's like, in order to get some security, you got to give up some of your freedoms. I mean, that was Heydrich's move. And here's the thing. Those scanners, what they do is they measure moving, what you dial them in, and so anything that's stationary doesn't read up. So you kind of I don't know, whatever you want to call them, you register them, so they know that everything that metal's in the area. Then what they actually pick up is signatures of moving metal objects and its density. So, for example, if you have weapons as a whole are dense metal because of just the actual platform itself. So you have to kind of it will pick them up. Now the range is fixed for one, but if you were to say put 20 or 30 in them, yeah, they'd pick them up. The only other the question then that goes to force you to acknowledge is, what exactly will that do with the Vegas concealed carry laws? Because casinos don't have one that doesn't let you carry on the floor,
right? Unless
I'm mistaken.
No, I think Terry Wynn said that no guns are allowed in the casinos, I guess, except for staff and security, etc.
Is that in every place in the casino, even your room, or is that just in the casino proper?
He didn't necessarily qualify. It sounded like he just said casinos, just in general. So I'm not sure about the rooms, but he pretty much said through their scanners and through the technology they already have. He said within the last couple of years they've completely upgraded their security, retrained their housekeeping, like from the ground up, millions and millions of dollars of upgrading their security. But he also alluded to the possible need for more things like these back scanner or whatever they're calling them, and just more metal detectors, etc. Which
we just think there's a bigger picture to this.
Sure.
For the motive, they can't find a motive, George. They cannot find a motive. The fact that they cannot find a motive for this shooting, look, I think this goes much bigger, and people can call me insane, people can call me crazy, but the day after this happened, I said there were other shooters. I went on gut feelings all the time,
well,
George.
I'm gonna throw something out.
Hold on. The that this goes much bigger, and you don't have to go down this rabbit hole. You don't have to be as crazy as I am. How's that? We'll save you now from it all. But
Okay, I'm going to give
a guy goes out and he shoots a bunch of country music fans, right?
Right.
Is that poking the sleeping bear, the conservatives in this country, to try and get an uprising going so that they can get something bigger? Not only to sell billions of dollars of scanners, but also at the same time hit conservatives, piss off the conservative base in this country, the constitutionalists who finally say, you know what, F you, we've had enough, it's time to fight back, and all hell breaks loose. I think this goes much bigger in my mind.
Well, one of the initial stories was they found Antifa literature in this stuff, which was another, we never found that verified or not. But it posted that same thing of like, what, he's Antifa? Just that right left thing.
But here's the thing. I'm telling you right now, I have a tough time believing he was the shooter. I have a very tough time believing.
I'll give you one without having to go down the rabbit hole. Let me ask you a question. Which one of you in the last week has heard about the Federal Reserve asking that they said that they're going to clear a little over $2 trillion off their balance sheets in the next year?
Right.
I mean, and I'm not. This isn't.
Even Rand Paul's not raising hell about that.
No. I'm not making this up. I'm not conspiracy theorying this.
No, I'm sure you're exactly right. I mean, that's what everybody's saying during all these different quote unquote distractions. What's going on? What else is going on legislatively, Federal Reserve? There's a lot of stuff that they're probably sneaking through while we're distracted.
Because, I mean, Janet Yellen, and this is on Bloomberg News. I'm not quoting Alex Jones, Mother, any of these, Mother Jones, whatever. This is on Bloomberg News that they've got $2 trillion on their balance sheet that they need to true up. Okay, what did you do with that $2 trillion? I mean, what do you need to true up with it? Are you selling bonds off? Are are those toxic assets? Is this, going to be a QE 3-4 scenario?
That's pretty much, they've already done QE 3 and 4. Between the collateralized debt obligations and the derivatives, $2 trillion is just a drop in the hat.
Right, but I mean, this is the same news that came out the same week, and no one is mentioning that. And I'm not, like I said, I have a hard time. And let me say this to Pat, because there's always a janitor in conspiracy theories. Okay, and this is something I point out. Sometimes conspiracy theories do come true. MK Ultra is one of them. The Tuskegee Airmen is another. I mean, there are conspiracy theories.
Gulf of Tonkin, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, name it.
Well, I'll give you another prime example. When I was in the Marine Corps, and this is, you guys, might remember this, might not. When I was in the Marine Corps in 1986 and 87, the Iran-Contra affair came out.
Right.
And no one in the Marine Corps said, we have a Marine that is running it. No one did. I mean, they were like, no. The House Armed Forces Committee, when Lieutenant Colonel North had to testify, prior to that, it was a conspiracy. It took them 5 years from 87. It was in Bush's 41 last year as president, where they convicted the last members of the Poindexter clan, whatever you want to call them, Admiral Poindexter. So conspiracy theories and things like that, they don't always unravel quickly like we want them to. Sometimes it takes years. But
only through historical perspective can we now say, hey, Robert McNamara said the Gulf of Tonkin never happened. But if you were on August, I think the Gulf of Tonkin happened August 4th. If you were on August 5th or 6th saying, hey, you guys, this never happened, you would have been how we are now. You're crazy. You're conspiracy. Only through historical perspective are we able to be, quote unquote, vindicated.
But and yet we have Tom Cruise's new movie out, playing the part of Barry Seal, who was a CIA pilot. And America's watching this movie,
and nobody believes
that hard to understand. I mean, and you and I talked about it, George. I had a friend. He had to explain to me. I said because he wanted to open an affiliate school underneath me, and I said, "Give me your full real name, your social security number, and your birth date." And he goes, "All right, I got to fess up to you. Here's the deal. I was a pilot. This is what we were doing. Iran-Contra. They were flying a DC-9 full of cocaine, pallets of cocaine. They dropped pallets outside of Detroit in a field and then landed at the Detroit airport where the FBI and DEA was. And unfortunately for the pilot and co-pilot, there was also media there. Exactly
Right.
as the movie that Tom Cruise just did. This guy told me this 10 years ago. Said we called up our friends in Langley and handed the FBI the phone, and he got on the phone and said, "All right, you're free to go." And the media freaked out. But this guy ended up having to go down for it, and he spent 10 years in prison because of it. So, this stuff goes on, and that's why I'm sitting here harping about this guy. Everything's pointing at him being an arms dealer, dude. I'm telling you.
He totally, for
Well,
me too, he fits the cutout. He fits the cutout totally of a Barry Seal, this guy. Shipping $100,000 to his girl, which is apparently no big deal.
200 times he wired money.
His brother's like, hey, if we want to go get fresh sushi in Japan, we go do it. Like, he was a baller. He was apparently some retired IRS agent, retired post office worker, whatever. I don't care if he's a gambler. He ain't making that much money to be balling like that. And with all the other, with the airplane, with the tag affiliated with these different entities, he just reeks of Barry Seal type activity.
Let me ask you a question. Just to point this out, where all of my fellow veterans ask, out of curiosity, how did Al Qaeda and ISIS get HK-416s?
Because there's a company, there's a company called Arsenal Weapons Manufacturing in Bulgaria and an airline called Silkway Airlines that's delivering them.
Right.
We got a Bulgarian reporter who said lost her job for bringing that to everyone's attention.
Well, and I point this out, HK-416s, and the reason that the one platform that HK-416 is the Navy SOCOM weapon that they're of choice, is, how does it get in the hands of ISIS and Al Qaeda? We're not talking about, a run of the mill. An HK-416 is actually a pretty expensive platform. And again, when people that have done something look at something and it doesn't look right, you have to start asking what's the rest of the story, guys.
Right.
It's like me and you. It's like marrying the stripper that claims to be a virgin. That doesn't just quite sound right. I mean, it just
something's not right here.
I'm
And on your honeymoon, you had to use a ham bone and chicken livers for a shim.
Yeah, I mean,
you got some explaining to do.
It's like the guys that come back from a 7th-month deployment and their wives are 3 months pregnant. We've seen.
What do they call that, Jody? What do they call
that?
Jody got a hold of her?
Yeah, Jody. But I mean, these are the things that happen. They just when you look at things, I want to know the truth. And here's the thing: it's easy to fall down the rabbit hole when you're not being told the truth. Because I look at these guys and I'm like, no, guys, that just doesn't sound right.
And when we've been lied to over and over, the most prudent thing to do would be to question the official story. And that's what's so beautiful about this, George. Lay people, general, normal people who do not do this kind of conversation are saying the same thing you are. Something's not right here. This just doesn't seem right. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Everyone has that disclaimer, but something doesn't seem right. So something's up.
And here's the thing. And let's not look. We don't have to look that far when we've been lied to. Take a look at the amount of ninja loans. And I'm just using this as a perspective because it was in commerce in all 50 states, and no one. And this is how easy it is for them to, or for people to be hoodwinked. Ninja loans, which were no income, no job verifications, were giving to the American public in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and no one bothered to ask, hey, this doesn't quite seem right. And it wasn't until afterwards we were like, yeah, that was a pretty stupid idea. So when you look at things and they don't seem right, you got to ask yourself, what's the rest of the story?
Right. So what do you think? What's the farthest the authorities will end up telling us in terms of the truth, George? Do you think they'll say, oh, we finally found another shooter? Do you think somebody's going to have to go down?
Yeah, I think that's going to go down. I think they're going
Or will it
to
be somebody who ends up dead in a shootout?
yes,
Well,
yes.
hey, did you guys just see in New York there was a gentleman in New York who was just raided by the FBI, and then a day late, coinciding with this, because apparently his charger, there was all these electronics found in the shooter's room. One of the chargers was traced back to this guy in New York. FBI leaves, he kills himself and his disabled daughter. This all happened within the last 48 hours.
Right.
And this was on
Take a
normal
look.
news.
Take a look at. We don't have to go that far back to take a look. Look at Ruby Ridge. Look at Waco. I mean, it doesn't. Or take a look at even at speed. What happens when you're running down the? You shoot the hostage. Well, there's that doesn't come into a narrative by itself. Nothing ever. I'm like Jethro Gibbs on NCIS. There's no such thing as coincidence, and
Exactly.
there's no such thing as coincidence in random patterns. That's that is the one of the things that I've been taught, and especially if you go into you know and to any military training, there's no they tell you there's no such thing as coincidence. That's why you have salute reports. You look at exactly what the enemy is doing to make sure that you have the right the right evaluation.
Well, and I think they were just uber sloppy this time because you just had, like I said, your lay folks questioning this. I mean, there's so many holes. But I mean, you know, I just, since the official story is the official story, at this point, everything else is just conjecture, circumstantial, et cetera, similar to like the JFK situation. Regardless of what ironclad information is, the official story is this guy with a shitty Italian rifle shot, 3 times in less than 6 seconds, creating whatever. You know what I mean? It's just
Right.
it's tough to
Like
go
I
against
said,
the official narrative once it's already been set into everybody's mind.
you identified everybody on the lawn except the babushka lady. Come on now. I mean, seriously. Names, birth dates, everybody else, and the only person you cannot figure out is the babushka lady who's wearing.
Or badge man, or
Right. I mean, everybody else is on the thing has been identified, and that's why it always leads. Here's this, and I've got to get going. But here's the final thing that what leads to conspiracy theories or leads to questioning is when the facts just don't add up. And like I said, it's not that we're questioning every active shooter. It's not that we're questioning every time there's been an act of violence. It's not that it's in this particular instance, there's just so much loose ends. And until you start telling the truth about them, we're just not going to be able to get a good story until,
the more answers they supposedly give us, the more questions we have, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
Because they start, and I know you've got to go, George, but in the end, the fact that people have been questioning what actually happened, suddenly they start saying, "Oh, he may have had help. Oh, there might have been a second shooter. Oh,
right.
A security guard. By the way, a security guard was shot and killed." It's.
Oh yeah, now we've changed the timeline of when he checked in. One of the most secured watch places ever. Oh no, he was here 3 days more than we thought. What the fuck? Come on, man.
And I never had sex with that woman.
Yeah. Look at me when I say this.
All right. Well, George, thank you very much
it's
for
always
joining
a pleasure, Pat and Jeffrey. You guys are, and you guys are doing a great job because these are questions that need to be asked and answered. So,
well, hey George, shoot out some of your social media so people can follow you, bud.
I will do so, and I appreciate this, and you guys have a great day, and we'll talk later.
Talk about your podcast real quick.
Yeah, shout out some social. Where can we track you down? Twitter, social networking.
We are on Veteran Radio Syndicate, which is vetrs.com. You can listen to my show there and also on Spreaker on the Veteran Radio Syndicate. I'm on Veteran Radio Syndicate every Sunday nights from 9 to 11. We cover political issues, and on Veteran Radio, I'm on Thursday nights at 8, where I cover financial transactions and how to manage money better.
Before we let you go, just let me know. What do you think, before, just if you can, in just maybe 10 seconds, What do you think happened in Vegas? After all this conversation, what do you think went down?
I think you had I think you had two shooters. I think it was a transaction that went bad in order to have some cover fire for the people that were there to get out.
You just went down the rabbit hole with us.
He did.
No, I mean,
We got him.
and the more I look at it, I mean, seriously, if you are going to, if there's two shooters, why do we only have one? And here's the thing. There's an old saying, two people can keep, or whatever, three people can keep it a secret when two of them are dead. Well, you shoot the guy that's doing it. The other guy is they had the escape route. Maybe he was the one that used it and Paddock was the patsy. Again, it doesn't, that's the
questions.
Too many questions.
George, thank you very much. George Pardos, ladies and gentlemen. And we look forward to talking to you again soon on this as more answers come out, my friend.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was a wrap with George Pardos, former Marine, breaking down with his astute analysis on the goings-on of what happened in Las Vegas, man. Pretty good episode, don't you think?
Yeah, well, and the thing about George is why I wanted to get him on is because he's not just an average Joe. He's a very intelligent guy. He owns a multi-million-dollar company. A combat veteran, has been in some pretty thick and heavy spots in combat before. And so, look, I want to hear from guys who have been through this sort of stuff, the shooting scenarios, things like that, and have their expertise weigh in on what we're talking about. And again, we just didn't. As this goes further, we're not being told the truth.
No,
right? On many,
clearly.
They've already changed their story several times. They've added things in, as we mentioned during the podcast. I just think the fact that George made that statement at the end and said that he thought it was a transaction gone wrong, at least he's gone that far.
Right.
Where I take it a step further and think he was just flat out set up. I think he was the fall guy, didn't know it, got whacked. I think he very possibly, without a doubt in my head, well, there is a doubt, but I think he was dead before any rounds went down range.
Which is possible. And again, that's like the more questions we think we have and the more answers we think we get, we just honestly just have more questions just because, the official story is clearly a lie and they convolute it with so much mis and disinformation about who this guy was. And
is it possible that he was a guy on antidepressants and went off the deep end and wanted to kill a bunch of country music fans? Yes, absolutely.
Anything's possible, I guess. But, the likelihood of that just sounds, just getting his government background, the planes, his brother's ties with PR organizations, it just reeks, man. To me, like having known these cutouts of individuals like Lee Harvey Oswald, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, Barry Seal, these guys, these scenarios happen a lot, way more than we think. And like I said, with the power of the social media and the internet, stuff's coming out.
Is it to kill two birds with one stone? Is it sell billions and billions of dollars of scanners in every arena and casino around the country and take out the conservative movement, take out President Trump, the globalist big move, right? There's a lot here. Look, that may be too much for you to comprehend. I'm just saying.
Well, I mean, if things go the way they wanted to as far as instituting this kind of technological infrastructure, that'll go beyond right and left. That's tagging everybody.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about high schools, movie theaters, etc., this is what's been prophesized by, your Brave New World. I'm not a huge fan of Aldous Huxley, etc., but I mean, this has been spoken about before.
Well, and to go even further, you sit there and you think, when you go back in history, right now you see all these people that would argue with you and I about they literally, as private citizens, defend the globalists.
Right.
They defend the globalists, right? The people that want that global control, the UN suddenly ruling over every country, which they're trying to do anyway.
Yeah.
The Council on Foreign Relations, all these global entities controlling everything. There's citizens, our fellow citizens, that are sticking up for this, that are fighting tooth and nail for their own demise, for their own control. And here's the thing. When you go back in history, over and over and over again, those people that fought for a Hitler in terms of political, besides the few top people,
right.
Those people that stood up for a Stalin, a Pol Pot, or this or that, once they get their power and are in control, those people don't matter either.
No.
We're all thrown in the grinder.
It's all a matter of political expediency, and that's kind of this Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution. They're making it so bad where they, I've heard your Aldous Huxleys and people say people are going to beg for your FEMA camps, beg for your global intrusion or your UN forces or whatever.
Please put a chip in me.
Right, exactly.
So I can get my welfare payments and scan for food. And
Mark of the beast, man, mark of the beast, and that's what people don't. I mean, it happens all over. The powers that be are so freaking masters at beguiling people and misleading and totally just basically lying to their face. People don't see behind the benevolent facade to see the more nefarious shit going on underneath, because then you're a conspiracy theorist, etc. No, dude, you got to get your own freaking critical thinking on. And as we say all the time, take responsibility for what the hell you put in your brain, because I say again, people's ignorance is becoming very dangerous.
It's annoying.
It is, but like
It's
you said,
annoying.
they begged. Shit was so bad with the Weimar Republic before Hitler came in. They loved when Hitler came in, or Stalin, or anybody who comes in this authoritarian kind of thing, providing supposedly this silver bullet solution to all your problems. In order for you first to take that, or be willing to take that, shit has to get real desperate and real bad.
Cause and effect.
And this is what we're having right now. We're having, like we say all the time on this show, unrest between Republican, Democrat, right, left, gay, straight, Muslim, Christian,
woman,
gender roles, all of that. They need us at each other's throat on all levels before the full plan can come in. But they're slowly and surely doing it, man. We're sort of like boiling frogs.
We're wise to it.
But we're hip to it, dude. We smell it like a fart in the car. And this show is to try to get you guys hip to it. And again, man, thank you guys so very much. Again, click the little PayPal link underneath us. We are grassroots, listener supported. Every bit helps, man. Thank everybody. Seriously, thank everybody so much who has chipped in so far. We need your help, guys. We definitely want to do more of this, take all of this to the next level, and we're going to need your help, man.
Thank you. We want to be on the ground in Vegas. We want to go to places. We want to investigate. We want to cause some trouble. We want to stir things up and make this even more exciting.
Absolutely. If that's possible, because we're so freaking exciting already. Thanks, everybody. Stay tuned. Peace, and there will be more.